we're able to welcome our next speaker, who is Andrew Cowley, who, as I mentioned in the introduction, is the author of two successful books, the Wellbeing Toolkit and the Wellbeing Curriculum. Andrew, once again, I'm just going to make sure that you're spotlighted so you're able to be seen nice and big on the screen. Take Jason off. There we go. And then if you just want to share your slides over the top of me, and you're good to go.
Right, okay, here we go. Well, thank you everyone very much, and thank you, Mark, for inviting me along today. Like I said, I'm going to talk to you about developing a culture of well-being, and do a search for well-being online and turn to images. You can pretty much get an image like this. So what are we talking about with well-being? Well, we are talking about something that is embracing wellness for all of our colleagues, and it very much focuses on mental health in many ways, as we'll see as we go through the course of our discussion. But basically, well-being isn't difficult. It's not a difficult concept to get your head around. It's only made difficult by sometimes the people who get involved in it. So I'm going to make a comparison here. Well-being is like the game of cricket. Cricket is fundamentally very simple. Like well-being is fundamentally very simple. Cricket is fundamentally propelling a ball towards some sticks to knock them over, and somebody trying to defend those sticks to hit the ball away in order to make a score. But cricket is more complicated than that, and well-being is made more complicated than that. Cricket's made complicated by the people that play it. Well-being is made complicated by the people that engage in it. So, anyone who's not familiar with cricket might want to ask why they're wearing coloured clothes, why they're using a pink ball or a white ball, why does a game last 5 days, another one last an afternoon. And don't get me started on spin bowling, because that'll keep everyone going forever. But you can see there, cricket's complicated by the people who play it. Well-being can be unnecessarily complicated by people who engage in it. Well-being is very much a societal concern. It's not just for schools, it's not just for staff, but here we're thinking about creating a culture of well-being in our staff rooms and also for our children as well. But here's a question to think about. Is your staff wellbeing programme simply papering over the cracks, or does it work from the base of values, principles and equality? In what I do in the day these days is I coach for the School Mental Health Award for Leeds Beckett University, and a number of times I've been having conversations and ask schools what they do for wellbeing, and they all come up with, well, a couple of years ago it was all yoga and mindfulness. They're not well-being, they're nice things to do, as we'll find as we go on. So why is well-being important? I know Joanna has shared this information already. We haven't coordinated with this, but these are reasons why well-being is important. So take your Wellbeing Index, Education Support Partnership, 77% of staff experiencing symptoms of poor mental health at work. 72% of teachers suffering from stress, and that's 84% of leaders. 46% of our teachers go to work while unwell. 66% report poor work-life balance, which impacts on their stress and anxiety. 64% report excessive workload as being behind their stress and anxiety. 42% believe the organisational culture had a negative impact on their well-being, and that's going to be the crucial point we're going to discuss in the rest of the time we have left. And 54% have considered leaving the profession due to the impact on their mental health. Now, if you've got school leaders listening in here, that's more than half of your teachers potentially considering leaving because of the impact on their mental health. And that is not specifically to do with COVID. So, are cultures built or grown? Well, cultures come about from relationships within a school. This is a quote from one of my books. Effective wellbeing is about relationships and all about culture. About half of what we do in school is about culture and relationships. The other half is about relationships and culture. Wellbeing is basically about two key features of the school, which are the systems and the people you have in place. So are they built or are they grown? I believe they're grown. Building is a linear system. Think about the building that you're sitting in. It started from the ground, it's built up, and you put the roof on the top. A culture is grown. It's cyclical. It takes nurture. It takes care. Think about planting beans in your garden. You put them in the wrong place, they'll get eaten by the birds. You don't water them, they won't grow. Put them in the right place and nurture them, they'll start germinating, they'll sprout out of the ground. But they need support. You need canes, you need string. Support them, you water them, you nurture them, you fertilise them. It takes time, and it's cyclical because at the end of the season, they'll create new seeds and they'll split and drop on the ground, use the plant again. That takes time. That takes time to develop. The only culture that is easy to develop is a culture of fear, and that's effectively like letting a big dog run through your very nicely cultivated beans. So let's talk about well-being in terms of myths. There are some myths. It's not a soft option. It's not mindfulness, meditation and massage. It isn't a token well-being day or week. If you've got a well-being Wednesday, you've got a toxic Tuesday and a terrible Thursday on either side of that, well-being Wednesday doesn't really cut it. And it's certainly not about putting cakes in the staff room. Putting cakes in the staff room is a nice thing to do, but if we had time, we could explore that a little bit more. But the cakes in the staff room are not an offer. So I very much believe we need to think strategically. Wellbeing needs to be modelled. As senior leaders, you can model what good wellbeing looks like. Model the time that you come in, model the time that you leave. First in and last out is rather a bit of an old hat now, and particularly in the light of COVID. I think it's happening an awful lot less. Being proactive and not reactive. We can't be entirely proactive. Particularly this term has taught everyone that absences relating to COVID-related illnesses have really impacted upon us. But you can plan and you can anticipate. Have a think where you're going to put those key pinch points in the course of the year. And think about leading with values and principles. And if anyone's familiar with the work of Simon Sinek, what is your why? What is your why? Why are you doing it? And is your why communicated? So what is well-being? Well, it's for the healthy and present as well as the sick and the absent. We probably all had to deal with some people having long-term absence, and it's important that they're looked after and their needs are looked after. But think about those people who are back in school and are keeping it going. Think about those people who never have a day off sick. You've probably got staff in your school who've not been off sick for 5 years plus. And that is testament to them. They might genuinely have been healthy, but does that mean they've never been under pressure? Particularly dealing with pressure of somebody else being off. Wellbeing is for SLT too. That's very important. Sometimes there's a narrative that said it's not for SLT, but it's not for SLT first, and that's important to remember. And that final point, wellbeing is led sideways in. But if it's led from the top, it feels like it's imposed, and it feels like that's an image of what wellbeing should look like. If it's led entirely from the bottom, it looks like that could just be being reacted to complaints of staff. But if it's led sideways in, that means everyone taking a responsibility in the school for what well-being looks like. There's a number of challenges which might come about. If we had more time, we could go into these a bit deeper, but the triggers of negativity come about from social media, and that's people reading things on social media, that about what's going on in other schools and feeling that impacts them, but also what people say on their own social media. And I do hope you have very strict social media policies about identifying your school. Staff social events can also trigger anxieties and negativity. Relationships between staff, how your staff get on with each other is important. And also having a think about what happens when two members of staff do fall into a workplace relationship. That does happen. It happens in workplaces. It's one of those common ways that people meet. But there are implications within a school if too much information is shared in that rather more intimate relationship. Think about perceptions of absence as well. How does absence is perceived? Do people discuss other people being off? They shouldn't do, because it's confidential matters relating to their health. But sometimes people do have that, particularly if someone is off on a regular basis. But added to this mix are how we face the challenges of the pandemic. Despite the fact we have restrictions going, pandemic is very much around. And as you have probably all dealt with, increasing numbers of absences this term, you will know. Here's some of the points that have really been challenging wellbeing. The obvious challenge to our physical health, and anyone who's suffered from COVID at all or effects of long COVID will know that. The mental health of staff and pupils has very much been impacted by the events of the last 2 years as well. Resilience is very different. The secondary colleagues will know that year 7s and year 8s have come in with a very different level of resilience and maturity because they've not had that rite of passage out of year 6. Staff and SLT longevity in the profession is very much under pressure now. DFE emails, we'll know from certainly through the summer of 2020, all those emails that came out at silly o'clock at night with changes to regulations, but no tracking on this. You didn't know what the actual changes were. There's an awful lot of reading and then a very short time to put them into action. The notion of catch-up, what does catch-up look like? Is it just academic catch-up? Or what about the catch-up with the children's mental health and the staff mental health as well? And then this notion of what a new normal is, or maintaining the old normal. Yes, I'm going to mention the O word. Yes, those inspectors are coming along, and in many cases they're saying COVID is not an excuse. That's a challenge to consider as well. Thank you very much for your time. I realise I've had a lot to pack in 10 minutes. If you want to find out a little bit more about myself, you can follow me on Twitter at that handle at Healthy Toolkit, which is the group I set up to discuss realistic staff wellbeing. You can find me on LinkedIn, there's a Healthy Toolkit blog, and of course I am in print, as Mark very kindly said before, the Wellbeing Curriculum and the Wellbeing Toolkit, both published by Looms Re-Education. Thank you very much for your time. I'll be delighted to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I mean, one of the questions I've got for you, because you haven't referred to it, and you've done yourself down a little bit, I think, is that one of your books, as you mentioned, the Wellbeing Curriculum, is very much aimed at the well-being of students.
Yes.
And you know, the curriculum in primary in particular. Just because I know we've got some primary colleagues on the call. What would you say to them about, obviously succinctly, what would you say to them about, well-being for students?
Again, very similar to staff. Let's think more widely than those offers of mindfulness and meditation. Let's think more broadly as to its curriculum, wellbeing curriculum embracing well-being as a life skill. Think about links to character education. Think about making our children good students, giving the opportunity to lead, giving the opportunity to reflect on what bullying is. Within the text that I've written, I've advocated that mental health has a very high priority. We also think about our own personal safety. We think about our care for the environment, digital safety, cyberbullying, developing a good feeling of trust, but also developing the opportunity to lead. And one of the strongest things that's impacting on children is awareness of diversity. And that's not something that is new, but it was something that's been very highly focused in the last 2 years with events in the United States, which have been echoed here as well. So wellbeing as a curriculum looks much more wide than it is.